happy today to have Dr. Michael Bagnell. Say hello to everybody, Dr. Bagnell, and I'll introduce you properly.
Nice to see you. Nice to meet you. Great to be here with you, one of my favorite people.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, Doctor, let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Bagnell. He's an expert in neuroscience. He's an expert in functional medicine. He's also a chiropractor. Dr. Bagnell is a keynote speaker nationwide and at many different doctors' conferences. More exciting is this year, 2019, Dr. Bagnell was the keynote speaker at every chiropractic conference in Florida, and I don't know how many others nationwide. So we are very privileged to have him here today to help us learn about the female brain and how he can help us to develop and grow ourselves within our brain, which is amazing.
Right.
I was very fortunate to get several questions from ladies here in the audience that have some questions they need to have answered. So we will definitely ask him those questions. And I'm sure he's got some things on his mind he would like to bring up as well that we don't even think of. While we were in the waiting room, I cornered Dr. Bagnell, and he's agreed to come back on for several other interviews. And the reason I asked him is because I know of several subjects myself, including the Epley maneuver, which he's famous. He travels the nation teaching other doctors the Epley maneuver that you ladies need to know about, and other areas that I'm sure are very helpful. So let's get started. Welcome, Dr. Bagnell, again.
Thank you.
We're privileged to have a man such as yourself, so we're happy to have you here. But I think the main thing is, let's get started by asking you, can you just give us an overview of how the lady's brain works and how you think you can help us, or any woman out there, develop ourselves and help prevent anxieties and depressions and all kinds of things? So I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Well, let me step just back a moment, and then we'll jump forward. And that is just kind of lay out a little bit more of my background, because people like to know what your training is and what your experience is. Of course, they always ask me when they come in, have you ever treated this, and how many times have you treated it? So a little bit of my background, as you said, my base training was in chiropractic medicine. So I became a doctor of chiropractic medicine 30 years ago. And then I was always interested in the brain. So I started soon as I graduated, into a postgraduate program in chiropractic neurology study for doctors already. And so at that time, 30 years ago, it was neurology. 30 years further, now up to date, it's neuroscience, as you mentioned. So I studied and I received a diplomate training in functional neurology, as some people know it. I also have a fellowship that I achieved in brain injury rehabilitation. So these are all postgraduate degrees and I just sat aboard 2 weeks ago in Denver. I was speaking at the International Society of Neuroscience Research, neurofeedback research. And I spoke and presented, but I also sat a board exam to become certified in neurofeedback. So I'm also board certified in that area as well. So with all that background, what would we say about the brain? We would say, currently, I would just quote Dr. Dale Bredesen out of UCLA. And he's the one who's written several books on reversing Alzheimer's. And so this is really a crucial area, Alzheimer's. This is a very debilitating condition. It leads to the death of many people. In fact, I shared this weekend with my wife at Logan University. As you mentioned, we're around the country. We're just outside of St. Louis. And at Logan University, I was sharing on the female brain, which I'll share with you here. And the statistic I shared with them was that on the Alzheimer's national website, it says that 1 out of 6 women will die from Alzheimer's if they're over 65. This is a great risk. And actually, it shows down further in the statistics that more women will die, unfortunately, this is a sad statistic, from Alzheimer's and complications than breast cancer. And that's not a very well-known statistic. So if you took all the people that pass from breast cancer and all the men that pass from prostate cancer and lumped them all together, there's still more people dying from Alzheimer's, which is a brain-based condition. So it's important. So now, why did I mention Dr. Bredesen from UCLA? He wrote the book on reversing Alzheimer's, and here's what he says in general. He says all Americans, or all people, should be getting cognoscopies every year. Cognoscopies, not necessarily only colonoscopies, which are really crucial, but cognoscopies, measuring how your cognition and your brain is functioning, very important to understand where you're going. So the reason he says that, and the reason he wrote the book, is because of this serious problem. And also because Dr. Amen, who I'll quote him, Dr. Daniel Amen, who has clinics around the world, one of the most well-known psychiatrists in the world, who has centers and clinics that bring in different types of therapies than what someone may consider part of a psychiatric care to improve brain function. He says that because, and he agrees with Dr. Bredesen, that everyone should be having basically a brain checkup every year because the technology is available and it's not invasive and it's affordable. And so why aren't we checking our brain? Because everything we do, my ability to speak today, my ability to move my hands, even though I'm not Italian and I talk like that, my ability to function and think and walk and maintain balance and have a good night's sleep. And as you mentioned, not be anxious more than what is considered a normal range, right? There's normal anxieties of life. My ability to do all those things has to do with my brain. So if our brain is healthy, it's going to carry us in a more appropriate way through our day-to-day living. So that's my background. So I do have the training, hopefully, and with 30 years of experience, we're understanding more and more about the applications of neuroscience, especially for ladies that come to visit us. We have them come from all over the country. We can talk more about how they can work with us if that's something they'd like to know more about as we finish. But as ladies come in and they'll spend time with us, we'll evaluate their brain and find out how it's working and how maybe it's not working, or how it's, we would say, dysregulated, which may be contributing to some of those conditions that you were mentioning. So I'm going to pause there, let you kind of develop that, and then I'll answer.
Okay, so I do have a couple questions. So this cognoscopy, so that seems almost more important than a mammogram because the chances of us having Alzheimer's is much more greater than breast cancer.
I would say that's a good statement. I would say it's equally as important, at least.
Because we have a 20% chance of getting Alzheimer's. You just told us that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So number one, if this cognoscopy is so important, you know, a lot of the ladies today are in our 660 group do live in Florida, but I know you're in Miami, but if they can't make it to come to see you, or where can they go to get this cognoscopy? Are there many clinics nationwide? Can they go to a hospital? Where can we go get it?
Perfect question. So we would say, well, what does that entail, a cognoscopy? Many of us, at least over 40, would know what a colonoscopy entails, so we won't get into that. But a cognoscopy is really, it's just a term right now. It's not something that's not a particular named test. So you wouldn't go to your physician and say, I want a cognoscopy. They'd say, what, are you crazy? What's going on with you? But what we would say is it's measuring cognition. So then how do we measure the health of your brain, cognition, and other aspects? So the way we would do that is several fold. We could say, number one, we can get a brain map, a QEEG. So the heart would be an EKG. All the ladies, I'm sure, know that. Heart health is very crucial for ladies and men, but ladies in particular. So we know the EKG for the heart and an EEG for the brain. So we would take a brain map. We would record electrical activity in the brain, and we would check it against a normative database for the lady's age and for her, of course, gender matched. And we would say, is this in a proper range, the electrical activity of her brain for her? So that's number one. We can get a brain map, and we perform those in our office every day. And many people do throughout the country as well. Then we could also look at eye tracking movements. And you and I and my wife, when we were up there visiting you, we talked about that, and we measured some patients there with a very special technology that has retinal tracking sensors in it. It's very high tech. And it's used to follow eye movements. You say, well, why would I have my eye movements evaluated for my brain health? And it's because eye movements and brain health are interlinked. So we know that people with Alzheimer's and dementia and Parkinson's have very slow eye movements. We know that children with autism or people on the spectrum, autism spectrum disorder, have eye movements that are different than some of the more normative eye movements. We know that there's all kinds of ways to measure, and it tells you everything about what's going on in the brain. So the old adage, the eyes are the window to the soul. The eyes are also the window to the brain. Wow. In fact, the eyes are actually extensions of brain tissue. When the fetus is, the baby, the fetus is growing, it's extension of brain tissue. So, this is the one place you can actually look when a doctor looks into the eye. They're looking at the retina, but they're looking, this is brain tissue that has evolved into this position, developed into this position. So we look at eyes, eye tracking tests we do. We use a lot of balance tests. We even do some computerized neuropsychological tests for ladies. So you can imagine if you came to our office, Trish, which you visited and you know all about us, we would look at how the eye tracking is. We would do a brain map. We might do a genetic test. We're swabbing the inside of the cheek, send that off to the lab. And then we have a one-time genetic markers test for how your neurotransmitters are in your brain and how the functionality of those things are. Because we know there's genetics for migraine. We know there's genetics for anxiety that are related. We know there's genetics that might correlate with depression. So we know that there are genetic factors, electrical factors, eye movement factors, and several other testing types of procedures we'll use to get a very well-rounded view of how healthy a brain is, not just necessarily like this. I go and get an MRI of my brain, because the truth is, the majority of us, if we had an MRI, at least 51% or more, if we had an MRI of our brain, it would look pretty normal. It wouldn't tell us about how it's functioning, right? It's like looking at your car and then saying, well, it looks like it's in good shape, but you drive it and it's kind of chunking along or making all kinds of rattling sounds. So the function of the brain is as valuable, if not more, than just the structure. Mm-hmm. That's the cognoscopy.
Wow, that's great. Wow, okay, so we get it. We need to get all the mapping done, and we need to have diagnostics done of our brain, which I have. Ladies, I know Dr. Bagnell and his wife, and I haven't done it yet, but I need to. I understand that. So we need to get that done. Once we have that done, we have our results, like when we go to the door, our general practitioner, we have the results. Then what are the maybe 5 key things you're looking for that are issues?
Yeah, that's good. So I think that if we were to dial that all back and say, that cognoscopy, a good brain map will tell us a lot about the health of someone's brain. So if we just did that, but the way we do it is a very thorough evaluation, as I'm explaining, because this is really our wheelhouse. This is what we want to understand. How resilient is your brain? How healthy is your brain on every level, so that we can help you really carry on with the life that you would like to live at the highest level of expression and health that you can manifest, right? And we know as we age, our brain health goes down. So we want to try to boost that so that our decline is not like this in people, but as our aging decline might just be a little bit more on an even slope, and we can all sit there by the fire with our grandchildren and great-grandchildren and be, functional would be a nice thing. So the question was, what are the top 5 things? Is that what you said? Or the top few things?
Well, when you do our tests, what are you looking for that you can fix for us?
Yes.
You see? Okay.
So we're looking
that's our goal. We don't want to just find out what's wrong with us. We want to try to fix it. So, what would be the 5 things, that you could find that we can do something about it? So
good. Okay. So we would look at the eye tracking, because eye tracking, as I mentioned, tells us about the brain. So we could give eye brain exercises. And I'll quote another friend, a colleague, Dr. Joe Clark at the University of Cincinnati. He says with all his athletes, vision training is brain training. So we might give you some visual exercises on your iPad for you to do to improve the way your eyes track, which not the acuity, not your ability to read things and see distance, but your ability to move your eyes, which we really don't realize if we're good or bad or indifferent until they're measured. And then we can build those exercises on your iPad, and then you off to the races doing that daily, which you're improving your visual tracking or your eye tracking, which improves brain function, number 1.
You're kidding.
I'm not kidding. I'm serious.
Seriously, that's amazing. So there's things we are going to be able to do at home that will help us, that you don't even have to go to the doctor. We just have to know about them.
Right. And they have to be designed specifically, because specificity is king or queen in this way, I would say with the ladies. Specificity is queen. And what do I mean by that? The specificity of the activity, or being precise, is more important than general. So my mom used to tell me when I got more involved in this work, your grandmother used to do exercises looking at the clock across the wall, across the room, and moving her head like this and moving her head like this and moving her head while she focused on the clock. I don't know where she got those eye exercises. Like, she must have heard on a radio show. I know in her later years, she listened to every radio show, maybe Paul Harvey. Paul Harvey might have mentioned something about that. But she was doing things like that. And see, so that's good. It's general. and we want to be more specific. So someone might say, well, I'll do crossword puzzles, or I'll do Sudoku, or I'll, what have you, things, computer games on my phone. And those are okay. They have some value, but the specific ones have a greater value. Mm-hmm. And so this is kind of the way we want to consider. So eye movement exercise on the iPad after we understand what's going on. Brain mapping would tell us we can do remote neurofeedback. We have a device that a patient can purchase, a client, and we can get their brain map, and then remotely I can set up their program on the cloud, and I can watch how they're doing their neurofeedback at home. So in theory, you could be doing neurofeedback. I would set up the program based on your brain map, and I can know how you're doing with, if you're getting into the right zone, if you're having the proper type of activity in your brain, and I can change around the way the program is. So as you improve, I can make it improve with you. So you're training your brain. It's like I was your personal trainer for your brain. I'm just doing it remote.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, so that's two things.
Mm-hmm. That's two things. So what else could we do? Well, we also want to look at how the body moves, right? Because a lot of us deal with aches and pains. And once we do an exam, which is a little bit deeper, we would design or recommend, might be a better word, particular exercises. So we had a person that you knew that we evaluated, a gal, and she was doing several different types of exercises that actually I reversed those completely because of the conditions going on in her brain, and she was shocked. So for instance, she was getting a lot of deep tissue massage, and it made her feel great. But with her brain condition, that wouldn't be the primary type of massage I would recommend for her, because even though it would give her temporary relief, it would give her longer term problems in her brain. So we shifted her massage therapist focus to more of a relaxation massage for her. And it had a profound difference.
Really? Wow.
Yes. So those are three. I think the fourth one would
what
be
about food.
I was just going to say, so you mentioned functional medicine. I would say we would look at your lab work, your blood work, your hormones, these factors, and then we would design and make recommendations for what type of nutrition, very specific. Again, I'm going to stay on that word. Specificity is queen. So we make specific recommendations for some nutrients that would target the health of your brain and maintaining it.
Mm-hmm. I know once when you were up here visiting, May and we all went to somewhere for dinner, and May and I ate bad food, pizza or something. And sure enough, the next day, it was bad, whatever it was. The next day, we looked in the mirror and we started laughing because we said we look horrible because our face was swollen from what we ate. So I can see where food makes a huge difference in your brain if it swells your whole body up after one night of just eating, a couple slices of pizza.
Yes, exactly. I mean, food, we know that there's a gut-brain, brain-gut axis. Most people have heard of that at least. So they think about what they're eating. It's very important. But I remind them, like I did this weekend at Logan University, I reminded the doctors I was speaking to that it's a bidirectional activity, meaning that the brain controls the gut function and the gut influences the brain. So most people will understand, oh, my gut, what I eat affects my neurotransmitters, and this is true. But we also, the brain, if it's working slower and slower in certain regions, will cause the gut to work slower and slower. And this is not a good function for the gut. So we need a healthy brain to have a healthy gut.
Mm-hmm. Is it a rule of thumb, of course, besides the obvious things we're not supposed to eat, is there a rule of thumb that everybody should eat along the same line to help their brain function better, or certain foods hurt or help other people and not the opposite people?
Well, that's a well-stated question, because there's a lot. We've been around a long time, right? And you should see how many different eating, diet, nutrition books my wife and I have amassed. I think we have probably at least, honestly, 50, and we've probably given away another 10 or 15. Mm-hmm. So there's new research that comes out. There's new understanding. There's new insight, and some types of directions work better for some people and some for others. So whether you decide to be a vegan, or whether you decide to be more plant-based or more paleo, I think there's a variety of ways, or Mediterranean diet type of style. I mean, there's some general rules of thumb. I would agree with you, right? General rules of thumb.
Everybody's okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
okay.
And so those would be like, I would say this would be my opinion after 30 years in healthcare and working with nutrition for 30 years and functional medicine. I would say that we're probably better off if we reduce our daily amount of gluten, or if we go more towards a gluten-free diet. We're probably going to be better off, okay, number one, because we know that there are gluten-related antibodies or autoantibodies that can affect someone's thyroid. And a lot of ladies are concerned about their thyroid and weight gain. So we know that the thyroid is involved in autoimmune brain problems as well. So does everyone have a gluten problem? No, but it's probably behooves us to reduce our gluten intake down to very little, number one. Number two, dairy. It probably would behoove us not to be having so much dairy intake. So, you know, we say that we're not baby cows. We're the only species that continues to take in milk all the way through our life, not just in early years with breast milk, but with cow's milk, and we keep going for the rest of our lives. But now many of us are wise and we take in soy milk or almond milk or coconut milk or different types of, I like cashew milk with my coffee in the morning. So we probably don't want to take in as much dairy that comes from cattle, because even though milk does a body good, milk may not do the gut very good.
I see.
So those are two very basic. And then I would say, I would recommend to people, yes, you should have a good plant-based diet, and eating lean proteins is very important, because as we age, and I have a colleague in New York, she's a brilliant gal, and she talks a lot about muscle being the organ of longevity. And she has a lot of research on this. So what I would say is that it's important to have healthy source of lean proteins that does not have hormones or toxins, is more raised by grass feeding. And people say, well, I'll eat fish. And I say, well, then get wild caught fish. But we all know, we're not naive, that our environment is becoming very damaged. We know this. So we have to be wise and cautious and do the best we can. But we should be taking in protein as we age. And actually, the research shows that we should be taking in a bit more protein than when we were younger. Strange, right? Like, that's interesting. I thought less, but muscle mass loss as we age is very common. We pack on some pounds, we lose muscle, we start to have more problems, imbalances with hormones. So that's for another show. I think you would love the research that she's presented, which I can share with the ladies, about how to have muscle as the organ of longevity.
Okay. So that would be great if you come back and do that again.
Yeah,
so maybe we should answer a couple questions that people have written in, and we may have covered them already, but before we do that, can you give the definition of functional medicine? Because there's maybe a lot of people that don't know exactly what that means.
Yes. So actually, functional medicine, I would not say is my primary role, but we have the training. I have the training, and we advise those things. So I'm more so, I guess you would say, in this functional neurology. But let's go back. What is all this talk about functional this and functional that? It really is newer terminology that shows us, kind of like driving the car, like I mentioned before. It's taking your lab work, let's say, for functional medicine. So let's say you come to me as a client, and I look at your lab work, and your lab work says, based on the where it says you're low or normal or high or out of range, it all says that you're in range. And you say, my doctor told me everything's fine, I'm normal. And I look at it and I say, well, from a functional medicine standpoint, and this takes those parameters and makes them a little smaller so that we see if you're in an ideal range. Because I'll give you one particular example. Vitamin D. Vitamin D is very important as a nutrient. We receive vitamin D from the sun exposure, primarily to the upper chest here and the upper back. And so people will say, well, we live in Florida, we're fine. And I get their vitamin D tested, they're here in Miami, and their vitamin D is 30. The scale on the lab test is 30 to 100. And they're at 30, so their doctor said they're fine. So epidemiologists in North America have said that your vitamin D levels should be between 55 and 65 to help you prevent cancer. Prevent cancer, improve bone health, bone density in women, right? And reduce pain and reduce depression if your vitamin D level hovers 55 to 65. But they just came from a physician who told them 30 is fine. And I said, well, 30 is in the bottom of the normal range, but functionally 55 to 65 makes you function better. So functional medicine will evaluate your health based on more careful standards that wants to look at whether you're trending in a too high, trending, or too low before you get there. So we can alter those things before you have a problem.
So is functional medicine more isolated per person? Because you take a person themselves and look what other vitamins or medicines are taking, and then you see how others are affecting them. Is that part of functional medicine? No.
Yes, I would say that that would be also correct. You're looking very closely at it's patient-centric medicine on the one hand, where it's not this general thing. It's very specific to you with your lab work. And it's also looking at all the functional loops in the body. So how is your immune system doing? How is your hormones? So not just everything isolated, but looking at it in concert, like a concert symphony. We want to make sure all the instruments are playing properly, or the organs, rather than I'm just going to look at the thyroid because I'm a thyroid doctor. We want to consider everything together.
Okay, the next question is by Mary Castro. And I would like, I'm going to ask you the question, but then I would like it if you would tell the story about the little boy who fell in the swimming pool and you helped his brain recover, because I think that help people understand some ways that you can help people grow their brain pretty much. So her question, one of them is, how can you help us create pathways for somebody with tons of trauma and stress and other things that they need to overcome?
Yeah, I think this one of your ladies there was asking this in relation to Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Yes, she did. That was the next question. Do you agree with Dr. Dispenza?
So, I mean, there's a lot of, like, when that question says, do you agree with him? I'm like, okay, on which explanation do I agree with him? But in general, I would say Dr. Joe is a brilliant guy. He's got a lot of extensive training and coupled with years of experience. So he understands brain function, emotion, the soul of a person, how they're functioning, how they've suffered, and understands neuroplasticity. So in general, I would say he's a brilliant guy, and I have to agree with a lot of his directions on how to improve our health. So specifically diving down into that question, it is possible. The brain has an ability called neuroplasticity to make new connections even after it's been injured, damaged, traumatized. It has to have the right leading, the right training, or the right physician to lead the neuroplasticity. So like if you needed to strengthen a muscle that was injured, you might need to go to a coach or a trainer to help you do the exercises in an appropriate way to retrain it. Well, the brain is trainable. And so this is what Dr. Joe would also agree with, I'm certain, is that our brain has plastic, it can heal. We just need to understand where it is so we can understand where we need to go and what we need to let go of and what we need to latch onto. So I hope that kind of gives her a general answer that there is hope. Yes.
Right. Well, that's exciting. So I'm trying to put it in a layman's terms so the other ladies can understand too. But I also want you to let us know, we don't know who Dr. Dispenza is. So maybe the rest of the ladies listening don't know, because I don't know. Who is that doctor?
Dr. Dispenza is a very experienced gentleman, a colleague of mine in a sense, same background, but has also gone into neuroscience. He's written numerous books. I've written one book. He's written numerous books. And so, I mean, I would be easier for me to explain and take 10 minutes. Just Google his name. You'll find all types of things. Another name I want to, since we're talking about doctors, I want to recommend to the ladies is this book right here.
Okay. Dr. Caroline Leaf. Okay.
Yes. Switch on Your Brain. So my wife has found this book. This lady is a really brilliant neuroscientist that helps women and men understand how your brain's functioning, how to develop neuroplasticity, and how to take you in the direction of healing many different things that might be going on in your brain. So I would highly recommend Dr. Carolyn Leaf. So Dr. Joe Dispenza, Dr. Carolyn Leaf, and then let me go into that story of the young boy that we work with. So in Florida, there are more near drownings every year than any other state in the nation, I believe. And they're classified as HIE, it's a fancy name or acronym for hypoxic, meaning they didn't have oxygen, ischemic, they didn't get oxygen to the brain, and encephalopathy. But anyway, these young people have suffered near drowning, they survived, but they have tremendous amount of brain damage. So rather sad situation. But
You're
we
frozen.
treated some clients like this and work with them. And what we do is, so it's really remarkable. You would think, well, there's not a lot you can do when they're at that stage, but that's not true. Based on the neuroplasticity model that we understand, we can do many things to start enhancing, and other practitioners working with us to enhance the brain function and start bringing this person back from this terrible injury to the brain for such a young person who has their whole life ahead of them, 2 or 3 or 5 years old, or these ages. So this does show us that the brain has the ability to heal. We just have to know which pathways to stimulate. And that's the work we do on the most severe cases.
So what do you, after you do all of your testing, then you find out what's wrong. And then I guess certain sections of your brain relate to that issue. And that's the part of the brain you're going to work on to build more plasticity,
right,
or whatever you call that.
Exactly. Yes,
right.
You have it. You said it in a nutshell better than I did.
Well, okay, here's another question. And if anybody has a question, you can certainly ask us. But Laura Lou says, is it as important to exercise your brain just as much as we exercise our body? Which is interesting.
Is it important to exercise your brain as much as you exercise your body? Well, when you exercise your body, you do exercise your brain.
As much as your body?
Well,
oops, you're frozen again, just for a second here.
I mentioned this weekend as well, that what has probably the highest amount of research on brain improvement is exercise. So exercise is really paramount to improving. So we can say exercise or movement. Movement and exercise are really two very key ideas to improve brain function. We would think, and I asked this question to lay people, I put up on the screen when I'm presenting to a population of like your ladies, which one of these is going to give you the most brain activity? Reading, learning a musical instrument, a new instrument, learning a new language, crossword puzzles, or exercise? Nobody picks exercise. They all pick some of the others because you think it's got to be complicated and make me think. But actually, movement has the most research, or exercise, for improvement of brain function. So we do need to have our brain activating, but I don't exercise my brain in it like I'm just going to do exercise for my brain. I do different types of physical things in my environment that have a consequence on helping my brain. And then from time to time in my office, when I have a little downtime, I'll go over to some of my technology and I'll run through some of those as a way to exercise. So yes, we can do specific exercises for the brain to make it healthier, but I think if you're not even exercising on your own daily, that would be where I would start. You say, well, what kind of exercise? Well, we know high intensity training is very important. We know walking can be very healthy in the environment, like a natural environment, like around your beautiful home there. That's like a beautiful place to be. Walking out in nature is very healthy, but you also need some high intensity activity. Horseback riding can be a very healthy activity. We're actually in the process of putting together, and I think you've already seen it, Dr. Bagnell's Brain Camp, or Super Brain Camp, I think we're calling it, with the dolphins coming up in the Keys. And so interaction with large animals is really a phenomenal experience. But getting back to other brain training, high intensity yoga is very good. Meditation is very helpful for changing plasticity. So there's a variety of things you should do, and you should do a variety, not just one. So that helps the brain.
Okay. I heard once jumping on a trampoline was good for your brain because it's going up and down. I don't know. I heard that. Is that true?
Yeah. I don't think there's any research that substantiates that. People might claim, hey, that really helped me think more. And it could be more from circulatory changes. It could be for stimulation from the vestibular system. There's different reasons why it might be helpful, but it's not necessarily the prescription for brain health.
Okay. Okay, Sarah, another question. Sarah Velasquez says, are there specific exercise and diets relating to enhanced memory or focus for people over age 50?
Okay, I'm one of those people, so I'm with you on that. Yes, we mentioned some of the different nutritional recommendations earlier, but let's talk about two specific ones for this answer. And that would be, you have to keep your blood sugar down. It's very, very important to keep your blood sugar regulated. Because we know, going back to Dr. Bredesen from UCLA, that too much blood sugar contributes to brain neuroinflammation, which is related to Alzheimer's. So we don't want that blood sugar going up too high. So you got to go and get your blood work tested to find out what your glucose is and what your glucose and your heme A1C. And that tells us how you're handling your blood sugar over the past 90 days. So again, functional medicine doctor would check that. Maybe you only get your glucose evaluated with a regular physician. Maybe not. Maybe they check both, because they usually do now, to see if you're trending too high on your blood sugar as you're getting older. Because blood sugar control, now there's certain nutrients that can help that. I know ladies a lot in the past have done cinnamon and things like that. I think it's not as popular as it was a few years ago, but there are some that are actually more effective, in my opinion, that I would use, and we can mention those at another time. I really rather not mention too many particular nutrients. Aside from number two.
We can do that as a separate show.
Second one, nutritional recommendations for health of the brain. But the second thing besides blood sugar, and we're talking about memory and a healthy brain, is omega-3s. We need to have a healthy source of, or healthy fats in our diet every day. So Kalamata olives and avocados and a very good quality olive oil, no more corn oil, no more vegetable oil, things like that. So we want to have healthy oils, adding MCT oil. Some people add coconut oil to their coffee or their tea and things like that. And so these healthy fats are important for the brain. The brain is the one place that we want the healthy fats to be. We may not want them in our midsection or our arms or wherever, but we want them in our brain, because the brain is built from these healthy fatty acids. So a good source of fish oils, a healthy source. Now, you got to be cautious with fish oils, because everyone knows they're important. And when I say everyone, I mean not only us, but all the big companies, all right? So you can get 1,000 capsules for, I'm going to be facetious, for like $2. That may not be your best buy, because the quality may be very poor. So you want to be more discerning about that, and maybe head to Whole Foods and talk to some people there, or you email us and then we help you direct to the proper things.
What is your email, by the way? What is your email, Dr. Bagnell?
Yes, well, you can
If
reach
somebody
us.
has a question.
Perfect. Our email is my name. You can see it back here, Bagnell. It's Bagnell Brain Center @gmail.com. Bagnell Brain Center @gmail.com, or bagnellbraincenter.com for our website.
And you'll be happy to answer their questions if they email you? Okay, I'm just trying to get you to say that.
Happy to answer the questions.
Next question.
Sure.
Sarah Velasquez also wants to know, are there any new techniques more recently that they've uncovered? Because it seems like every year, they're telling you to do something different, and probably for the better. But are there any new techniques or developments to help prevent deterioration of your mental capacity? Because none of us want Alzheimer's and all that. So
absolutely,
it's probably something we're eating or whatever. I don't know.
Well, the blood sugar is a really crucial one over the past few years. We've known that the omegas are very important for people with ADHD, or for really all of us, to decrease inflammation. But then there's new therapies that are available. Now, most people going to they wouldn't go to their neurologist if they just said, I feel like I'm just slowing down in my memory. Most people are not going to their neurologist, right? We would agree. If you feel that yourself, I'm not going to run to the neurologist. What are they going to do? Give me a medication. But a chiropractic neurologist, or also known as a functional neurologist, like myself and my colleagues around the world, utilize applications from neuroscience. For instance, one is tongue stimulation. So we have a device that we put on the tongue intermittently, on, off, through parts of the therapy that stimulate the tongue electrically. Like, remember when we were children, the battery, you check the battery and, ooh, you feel a little shock. Yeah. So the research has shown that tongue stimulation activates the brain stem and then sends signals further up into the brain to increase activity in a brain that's probably slowing down. Someone with depression, someone with anxiety, someone with MS, multiple sclerosis, someone with a balance problem. So tongue stimulation can be very important in mood disorders. And so we use tongue stimulation as just one example of an application. Now, who would think of that? But the research is there. And it's not going to make its way too quickly to the general population. It's used in these special clinics that we work in.
Right. So people listening that are out of your reach, they're somewhere else in the world, they go to a functional medicine
Functional neurologist.
chiropractor
Functional neurologist.
would recognize all these separate areas.
Correct. Yeah. And as they emailed us, with a location, we can help connect them.
Oh, we can't hear you.
My microphone not working?
Oh, they can email you. Okay, so if you're out of the area, email Dr. Bagnell at the, what was the email address again? Your
Bagnell Brain
email
Center
address?
at Gmail.
Okay. Bagnell Brain Center at Gmail, and he can refer you to a doctor up in Wisconsin or wherever you're at. Okay, so we still have a couple more. Do you have the time, Dr. Bagnell, or your patients are backing up?
Sure. I have
You're
a
okay.
couple minutes.
Okay, so I know it's too big of a question for just this one interview, but hopefully you'll come back and we can have one session just on this subject. But I do know worldwide people are calling Dr. Bagnell for him to teach them what's called the Epley maneuver. And I'd like him to explain why and what it is and whatever else you'd like to say about that. But I want you ladies to be aware of this solution. Okay. Take over.
A lot of people end up with dizziness. They feel dizzy. We had one of our patients for many years called us yesterday to come in. She's a school teacher. And she said, you know, when I lay back on my bed, I started a new exercise program. She said, when I lay back on to exercise, and now when I lay back in my bed, just for the past week, I feel dizzy. So it was a particular position that caused her to feel this dizziness. And so many people around the world deal with something where the crystals get loose on one side in their inner ear. And when they have that, it can create a dizziness, instability, and it can be very debilitating with some people, whether you're older or not older, younger people also. And then people who have concussions or head impacts, they bump their head really hard, they hit their head, or they're in sports, like a lot of young people, they can also cause those crystals to come loose. And through a very simple positioning maneuver that Dr. Epley developed, who he just recently passed away, to reposition those crystals can take all that problem away within 1 to 2 visits. And those problems can go on for years with people. So we had a gentleman who has a PhD in educational development. He was at a very severe level of depression, somewhat suicidal at that point, had come to us because he read about neuroplasticity. And so we evaluated him, all those tests that I mentioned, and we found that he had, as part of the problem, some crystals that were not properly balanced in his ear. And we fixed that in the first or second visit. And he said the majority of his problem of depression had diminished like 75% in one treatment. Why? Because when you have things like this that might cause you to feel dizzy or imbalanced, those same neurology, the nerves, the projections, the signals can upset emotions, can upset thought and cognition, can upset memory. So people can have memory issues, balance issues, dizziness issues caused from that, but also emotional issues. And it can go on for many years because they learn how to kind of adapt and manage themselves. Well, I just won't sleep on that side, I'll sleep on this side. But it could be a very simple solution for them through this maneuver. They can YouTube and watch it, but so it's better to have a professional take you through that and reposition and have it taken care of. So yes, we do that. And it's a very simple procedure that gives people back their life.
Okay, great. So when, so many of us have loved ones that are elderly, as young people that are dizzy, but especially elderly people. So
Yes.
They always say that, or many times I've heard that elderly people are dizzy because their core are off balance and dizzy because their core isn't strong enough. But could it in fact really be their crystals in their ears are messed up and they're not getting checked?
Well, it could be very well. I mean, we can't really say the reason that, we can't say this. The reason that elderly people are dizzy is because of their core. We could say that many elderly people have a poor core strength, and that would contribute to an imbalance problem.
We
Totally
can't hear
agree with
you.
that. Oh, it's probably delaying. So many elderly people have a core problem, weakness, and that could contribute to imbalance, just like the crystals. So we know that there's a lot of different types of problems that could contribute to dizziness with an older person. Over medication use, core issues, crystals in the ear, visual problems, and brain issues, weakness in the brain. So all these are things we address. I think we're frozen. We may have lost our connection. We'll work get it back here momentarily. I see Trish is back. We're good.
There we go.
Okay.
We're good now. Yeah. So we're back. I don't know if everybody's still on, but thank you for coming. We're pretty much at the end. Maybe we'll do the Epley maneuver another meeting, and we're so excited to have had you. You've been a world of knowledge, and we're very excited to ask you some more questions and have you back again as our guest.
Yes, thank you very much, and reach out to us at bagnellbraincenter.com. Thank you, Trish.
Okay.
Great day.
Bye-bye. Thank you, doctor. Bye-bye.
We're at the end of another enlightening episode of the World Wellness Show, and we want to be reminded of the incredible insights shared by our esteemed doctor. Their passion for health and wellness have provided us with valuable knowledge to enhance our well-being. We offer educational information and suggest strongly that you seek medical attention through your physician or other medical professional. Until next time, thank you for coming.